Let me conclude the case study quickly, and then we'll move on to the next topic. So in the Java code, we talk about this slide here is more like an exercise for you, right? This is like a summary about the selection sort and insertion sort. You can read it just to convince yourself that's actually true. For the selection sort, for the insertion sort, I don't need to repeat it. This will be the exercise for you. You may just want to modify the source code I gave to you. I'll show them to you on Eclipse very quickly, and then I want you to modify in the following way. We want to arrange in a non-ascending order rather than non-descending order. Number one, that's what we want to sort into. Number two, rather than maintaining the sorted area on the left, we want to maintain the sorted area from the right. What do I mean? Okay, what I mean is, over here, if you think about, let me put it here. Why not? If you think about this is the array. Initially, it is completely unsorted, right? And every time we actually want to run some iteration, we want to grow the sorted area on the right by one element, and then by one element, and then all the way to over here. Rather than just go from left to right, right? That's just a variant you can definitely practice, right? Let me erase this, but you get an idea. All right, let me now move back. And that's about the exercise you can feel free to do. I think that's something that will just strengthen your understanding about how to implement the two sorting algorithms. All right, so what's our conclusion for the case study? And we know that asymptotically, the running times for selection sort and also insertion sort, even though they work quite differently, they're both valid solutions, but they are equally good or equally efficient. It's really difficult to say choosing one over the other because asymptotically, they're quadratic. For your information, as a heads up, we're going to learn about a strictly more efficient algorithm. We're actually going to learn at least a couple or a few, like a strictly more efficient solutions later in the course, whose running time is going to be n log n, because the n log n is strictly cheaper than actually n squared. Right, that's something we're going to see later in the course. But I think definitely make sure you use the opportunity for selection sort and insertion sort to really make sure you master the analysis on programs involving arrays and also nested loop. I think that's a valuable lesson I would like you to have. And before I move on to the next topic, I'd like to mention about two more items and for your information, also better for your good for your learning. Number one, for the selection sort and insertion sort over here, you can see that we did not actually create any new array. You can see the input array over here is the same as the output array. There is no new expression in the selection sort or insertion sort, right? You can see in the selection sort over here and also in the insertion sort over here, we do not create like a new array in every iteration. But for my illustration, I just create new diagram here just to illustrate. But it's really the same array that we are really modifying. And there is a name for this. It's called in-place sorting. Let me now just mention that over here. Okay, so for both selection sort and insertion sort, is in-place sorting. So that means over here, sort directly by, okay, how about this? Sort by modifying directly on the input array. By modifying directly the input array without intermediate storage. And why is in-place sorting valuable? Well, apparently, for very large array size, in that case, by creating intermediate array, it's going to be cost a lot. So not just time-wise, but also memory-wise. So that's why in many programming interviews, usually, if they actually want you to implement a particular sorting algorithm, they would say, can you do it in place? Right? So in-place sorting is actually very important. Given a particular input array, you don't really create any extra array in order to do the sorting. You're gonna modify it directly. All right, it's very important. First item I want to mention: modifying directly without intermediate storage. All right, That's something I want to mention. And then the second item I want to mention is about Eclipse. You can definitely download the source code I made available to you. It's called example selection insertion sorts over here. Right? If you import the project into Eclipse, and you will see there are two packages. You got JUnit tests. You can definitely go over them. It's just for testing the correctness of the sorting. You are assumed to know how to read JUnit test cases from your EECS2011. If you get any trouble reading them or writing assertions like these, you should really reach out to me as soon as you can. And in the model package, we actually got the sorting class, which got the selection sort and also the insertion sort. I want to show you just how to use the debugger. Of course, as I mentioned in week number 1, I show you the parts of the tutorial you can watch in order to use how to use debugger. I want to show you very quickly how you are supposed to play with the insertion sort and selection sort I gave to you. Right? Let me show to you. Okay. What I want you to do is maybe start with the test sorting over here. Of course, every time you want to go over some algorithm, you should really go start with the test. Okay. Let's say we want to go over the selection sort. Let's find this particular one where the input array is not empty, right? Let's now maybe put the so-called breakpoint in line number 25, the first line. So we're going to pause at the execution time right before executing this, right? I'm doing this assuming that you actually know the basics about debugger. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you may just want to go back to week number 1 in the beginning in the resources page, and then go over some tutorial on debugger, or reach out to me, right? Either way, okay? You will need that. You will need a debugger for your programming assignments and programming tests. And yeah, basically. All right, let's now put a breakpoint over here right before we execute the first line. That'll be one possible starting point. And then we're going to launch the debugger. All right, so you can right click on the JUnit test case, test class, and say debug as JUnit test. Okay, click on that. And it's going to prompt you to switch to from Java perspective to debug perspective. We're going to say switch. And now you're going to see that the execution line is actually highlighting in green the current line that we are pausing. So now at this point, we are now right before we try to execute this particular line over here. And you can see the various panel over here. You got variables, you got breakpoints, you got expressions. In case you don't have them, you can show them. You can definitely just go to window and go to show view, and then you can see for example variables over here, and also you can see expressions over here. So these are the two common panels you might need for the debugger, right? Just to remind you. But now I got both over here. And the variables panel, we don't really have the A and sorted just yet because we haven't executed these two lines. Okay, so let me try to do that. So I can now say you can step over. That means I want to execute line by line. Step over, and then I've executed line number 25. So I got A over here. Click on that. That's the contents for array A, right? It's very valuable slow motion exercise you can do to make sure you understand how your code actually works. And if there's any potential issue for your code, your safest bet is to run your code in slow motion and then to find out what the error is. That's what I would suggest. Okay, step over once more. Step over once more. So now we want to say, well, we want to look into how the selection sort is going to change the input, right? Of course, you can do that. Let me just do 2 runs over here. Look, watch out what's going to happen. You can look at the A over here. A is the input. I'm passing A as the arguments for the method, right? So now if I say step over, this is going to change to be sorted. Currently, it's 3, 1, 4, 2. If I say step over here, it becomes 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Over here, okay, notice that, right? That's one run. One more run. I can stop the debugger, and then I can click on the debug button over here, or you can simply switch back to the Java perspective, and then you can just go back to package explorer, and then simply right click and say debug. That's another way to go. Okay, let's just do it that way. I want to debug as JUnit test, and then switch. All right, let me now step over, and now rather than stepping over to see the final result, the sorted array, which is not very exciting, I want to see the internal workings for a selection sort. In this case, you need step into. If I click on step into over here, so this is where I am, right? you can definitely go line by line and then look at the variable section over here. You can see the A over here, and also you can see the different variables like I, also minimum index, and etc. Right? As you go step over here like that, you can definitely see the various value over here. And then what if I want to go to the end of the iteration right away by skipping this particular inner loop? You can do that. You can simply put a breakpoint over here to say I want to go to the last line for this particular outer loop by running everything else in the normal speed without being slow motion. Right? After this, put a breakpoint here, and then rather than step over or step into, you're going to say step return over here. Do that, and now I'm at the end of the first iteration. Right? In that case, you can definitely check the different variables over here. We can type in the expressions over here. You can type anything that makes sense. For example, A will be the array, and also A at index 0 will be, the value that's there, and etc. Right? If you got any trouble with the basic for debugger, go to that tutorial which I refer you to in the beginning of first week. All right. And when you are doing this exercise in the debugger, you may just want to compare them with how I traced for insertion sort over here in the table, and also selection sort. I think doing that will definitely help you just deepen your skill about Java programming for sure. All right. That's about the Eclipse, and of course when you're done, always remember to stop and then change back to the Java perspective. Alright? Okay, that's about everything I want to say about the first basic data structure of arrays. And let's now move on to the second topic of the module. Actually, when I look at my watch, it seems like we only got 4 minutes left from the 3 hours limit for this week. I'll better respect your time, so I'm not going to continue any further. It is always time to really cover things more thoroughly. So I would say I'll delay the start of the second data structure, which is about linked lists, for week number 3. That's when we will properly start about the linked list. Hopefully we can finish the topic for the remaining part for lecture number 2, maybe in hopefully 1 or 1.5 weeks. So you will be ready for your later programming assignments or programming test. Okay, but let me emphasize one more thing before I let you go. You want to make sure before next week, before week number 3, you want to just go back to the very beginning of this particular lecture. Okay, let me just go back there. And remember this slide over here about the background study. Make sure you actually fill in the gap, if there's any, about generics in Java. So when I actually introduce you to those linked lists in week number 3, starting from next week, I will actually also talk about how you can implement a generic version of the linked list. And make sure you actually study this background study, which I assume you already know. Otherwise, it will be difficult for me to cover everything from scratch. Hopefully that's understandable, right? Everything about studying the background is already available to you. It will be up to you to really catch up, right? If you got any questions about Java generics, reach out to me. All right, I'll see you in week number 3. Happy studying.